when you're watching TV or sometimes you're watching a movie, sometimes there's that black and white screen, that disclaimer that comes up, graphic content, TV-14 or PG-13 or whatever it is, and always gives that explanation. If I could show that to you this morning, I would, because what we have here, what our meditation on this morning is going to be, is nothing but graphic and violent. So you've been warned. You may not know the name Aaron Ralston, but his story is probably one that you're familiar with. So you may not know his name, you probably know his story. He's a bit of an outdoor enthusiast, I guess you could say. And he was just an ordinary person, but he became famous by a hiking incident in 2003. He became famous for doing whatever it took when everything was on the line. 2003, hiking by himself out in Utah. And he's around this slot canyon. And if you don't know what a slot canyon is, it's a wonderful creation that God has made. It's a very narrow but very deep. It's like a sliver in the ground. It's maybe only 2, 3, 4 feet wide in some spots, but it's very deep. So he's rappelling down this wall. A freak accident happens when an 800-pound boulder gets dislodged, comes hurling down at him, and traps his right arm against the canyon wall. So there he is. He's suspended by his ropes, trapped by the boulder, stuck. And he was alone because he was hiking alone, and he was truly alone because he didn't tell anybody where he was going to hike or what he was going to be doing. He was alone. So, what do you do when you're literally stuck between a rock and a hard place? Well, like any good hiker, he had his multi-tool, maybe the Swiss Army knife or something. He had a dull 2-inch knife. So he starts chipping away, trying to chip away at that boulder that's trapping his arm, trying to see if he can pry it loose. To no effect. It's an 800-pound boulder. 3 days go by. 3 days. And on the 4th day, he realizes that if he wants to live, he's going to have to cut his arm off. It's the only way. So after being trapped for over 5 days, 127 hours, he does whatever it takes. He cuts his own arm off, and he walks away from that king. I pray you are never in that kind of situation, right? Nobody wants to be in that situation. Nobody expects to be in that situation. But put yourself in his shoes for a moment, or if something like that, some similar situation were to happen to you, I think you would come to the same conclusion that he had. I can stay here and die with all of my limbs intact, or I can live to see another day without a body. Would you be willing to do whatever it takes? Would you be willing to do whatever it takes to save your life? I think you would. I think if you realize that you'd never see your family again, you'd never see your loved ones again, you'd look at that arm and you'd say, it's worth the sacrifice. I think you would be able to fight through that enormous amount of pain to live again. You do whatever it takes. See, we get intense about saving our life. We get intense about it. We fight tooth and nail. We fight with a vengeance, right? And if you're intense about saving your physical life, your earthly life, your here and now, how intense do you get when it comes to your spiritual life? You'd agree that your spiritual life is more important than this life, right? That's way more important. We're talking about eternity, heaven and hell. That's a big deal. So when it comes to preserving your life, if you're willing to cut your own arm off, how far would you be willing to go to keep sin out of your spiritual life? To keep your spiritual life safe and secure? Are you willing to do whatever it takes? Because that is what Jesus is talking about here this morning. That's what we get to focus on this morning. There's a lot in what I just read. There's a lot there. And for our purposes this morning, I chose that we would focus on verses 42 to 48. So those are what we're going to be focusing on this morning. Now, I have this artwork on the bulletin cover every Sunday. If you recall last Sunday, if you were here, and if you weren't here, there was a child sitting on Jesus' lap. And Jesus was making a point. He was illustrating a point with that child to the disciples. Here we see another child, again, with Jesus. He's using perhaps that same child to illustrate another point to his disciples. And to understand what Jesus is saying, you have to understand how children were viewed back in those days. Children were viewed as not very important. Not as if people didn't care for children. That's not what it is. People love children. Everybody loves their children. But when it came to being productive members of society, they weren't really able to do much. They were at the bottom, right? They're kids. They're maturing, right? They're growing up. They weren't really viewed as very important until they could support themselves, support the family with a paycheck by working, you know. It wasn't until they were able to take on more responsibility that they were no longer looked at as children, maybe, but perhaps as young men, young women. So if that's how children were viewed, maybe think of it this way. Today, if you go to someone's house, you knock on their door, you ring the doorbell, and the child answers the door, what do you say? You introduce yourself. Hi, my name's so-and-so. Then you say, can I speak to your parents? Are your parents home, right? You talk to the ones in charge. That kind of helps you understand how children are viewed. So it's not a criticism. We love children. It's just a fact. So that's how children are viewed. And now understanding that, Jesus, he makes this point to his disciples, not only showing him just how valuable these seemingly unimportant ones of society were, but he makes an even bigger point when it comes to how he feels about sin. This is verse 42. If anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for them if a large millstone were hung around their neck and they were thrown into the sea. Wow. Jesus does not normally talk like that. That's graphic. You notice how much detail he goes in there. It wouldn't have the same effect if he said, it would be better if they just died. It would be better if they drowned. No, he goes a little mafia on his disciples, right? He says, if you're going to cause one of these little ones, these seemingly unimportant ones to sin, if you're going to potentially lead them away from me, here's a 300-pound millstone. Go tie it around your neck and go jump in the lake and sleep with the fishes. Wow. Jesus is being very graphic for one reason. And that reason is to make sure he is not misunderstood. Because to them, to that society, what maybe seemed to be, they're just kids, it's no big deal, it's not a big deal, they'll grow out of it. No, he says, what's not a big deal to you is a big deal to me. He says, God hates sin. I hate sin. Go jump in the lake with a millstone around your neck. Making himself pretty clear. To make sure that in case they missed it, he goes on to continue to make himself very clear about how he feels about sin. He says, if your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life maimed than with two hands to go into hell, where the fire never goes out. If your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life crippled than to have 2 feet and be thrown into hell. If your eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out. It is better for you to enter the kingdom of God with one eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into hell, where the worms that eat them do not die, and the fire is not quenched. Again, wow. Jesus does not normally talk like this. Now there's a phrase in there that he uses. Causes you to stumble. He used it 4 times. That is a difficult phrase to put into the English language. It causes you to stumble is okay. It's an okay translation, but it doesn't quite grasp the picture that the one Greek word that phrase is used to. It doesn't quite grasp it. This is what think of an animal trap. You've got an animal trap. So there's different parts of the trap. You've got whether it's a lethal trap or whether it's just a cage trap. You've got the trap part itself. You've got the bait, but it's not going to do you any good unless you've got the trigger, the thing that causes the trap to go off. So I could have brought over a mouse trap. I've got a bunch of those in my garage. Okay, so you've got that mouse trap. You peel, I don't know, whatever part that is back, but you peel that snappy thing back, okay? You peel that back, and you've got that one metal-like thin rod or pin or whatever. It just lays across on that plate where you put the bait on there. And as soon as that metal part gets dislodged, boom, trap goes down. Boom. You're caught. That's how the trap works. That is the idea that Jesus is saying here. If your hand, if your foot, if your eye is the trigger part, if that's the thing that causes that trap to function and it causes you to be trapped in sin, get rid of it. Cut it off. Really? Cut off my hand, cut off my foot, pluck out my eye? We understand that if a doctor were to say, it doesn't happen as much anymore, but gangrene, if the doctor was to say if your limb was gangrene, and the only way to survive was that you would have to amputate your arms, we would get it. We would do that, you know. We get vicious when it comes to things like cancer. We root it out. We take out those tumors. We cut them out. We dislodge them. We do whatever it takes, even if it means losing a limb to save our life. We get that. We're willing to go that far. We get intense about it. How intense are you then? Do you share that same intensity when it comes to sin in your life? Or is an attitude maybe more of a casual approach to sin? Maybe it's too casual. I mean, you're around a group of friends and they say, all right, tonight we're going to go out and we're going to sin, right? No, that's not usually how it comes off. That's not usually how it comes off. This is usually how it comes off. Hey, tonight, man, we're going to go out, we're going to party, and we're going to get it wasted. I'd say that's not really an intense attitude to have against sin. I'd say that's a pretty casual attitude to have for sin. Yeah, we were out last night, man. I'm pretty fuzzy on the details. I can't really remember what happened, but we had a good time. Hey, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. Nobody got hurt. Casual attitude, isn't it? Maybe you're reading it's everywhere. You're reading a webpage. You're reading an article online, right? Scrolling down, and you know how every single webpage has ads that fill it up, right? All on the side, there's that one. Hot singles in your area. There it is. And then underneath it is maybe another one with a woman wearing even less clothing, and before you realize it, you're starting to stare at those and completely forgetting about the article that you were supposed to read in the first place. No, but it's no big deal. It's just a picture. Pretty casual. I'm going to move in with my boyfriend. I'm going to move in with my girlfriend. You're not married. No, we're not married, but we love each other. We love each other. And we're probably going to get married someday. What's the big deal? Everyone's doing it these days. It's not a big deal, is it? Not a big deal. Jesus said quite the opposite, didn't he? If your hand or foot causes you to sin, cut it off. If your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. What is it that causes you to sin? Just ask yourself that. What situation What influences are there in your life that just cause you to sin? Is it being with that group of people, that certain crowd, running with that crowd, even though you know every time you get together you're going to do bad choices, you're going to do terrible things against God, but there's that popularity, there's that whatever appeal, that it factor with that crowd. You can't just rip yourself away from that. What is it that causes you to sin? Is it when you're alone, in a room by yourself, with your laptop, no one else around, in the world of pornography, just a click away? What is it that causes you to sin? Our society, not just our society, let me say that again, every society, throughout generation, throughout as long as the earth has been around, has wooed people into just taking a casual approach to sin. As if sin, it's not a big deal. If it feels good, do it. If it feels good, do it. And then who's to say it's a sin anyways? If it feels good, do it, as long as you're not hurting anyone. Does Jesus have a casual attitude when it comes to sin? Does he say, if your hand, if your foot, if your eye causes you to sin, you didn't hurt anybody, did you? No blood, no foul. Don't worry about it. It's okay. No. It says, cut it off. Pluck it out. It says, if you're going to lead someone else into sin, go tie a millstone around your neck and go jump in a lake. He's very serious about when it comes to sin, about how he feels about sin. He does not have a casual attitude when it comes to it. He says, do whatever it takes, because it's better for you to enter heaven crippled and maimed than to enter hell with a perfectly fine body and a perfectly fine life. Do whatever it takes. Cut those influences out of your life. Now, of course, it needs to be said that Jesus is not telling you to go home to your garage, grab your hacksaw, and do the unthinkable. He's not telling you to maim yourself. Because even if you did that, that desire to sin would still be there, right? It's not really the hand that causes you to sin, right? Jesus is using an illustration. Where's that desire? It's right here. It's in the heart, and you cannot cut that heart out. Cut out that sinful nature. And if you can't cut out that sinful nature, you have to ask yourself, what hope then is there for you to do whatever it takes? What hope then is there for you to remove sin from your life? Jesus is very clear about how he feels about sin. But for your sake, he is even clearer about your salvation. Your salvation, he says, is not dependent on how much sin you rid your life of. It's not dependent on how many times or how much you're able to cut these influences out of your life. It's not. He says your salvation is dependent on him, on Jesus, who looked at those words about hell, where the worms don't die, where the fire isn't quenched, a place of eternal torment. He looked at that, the punishment for your sin, and he said, not a chance. He said, there is no way I'm going to let you suffer that. And with intensity like this world has never seen, he fought the most intense battle against sin. Every moment of his life here on earth he fought. He certainly didn't take a casual attitude to sin. He was intense, and he did whatever it took. And that battle cost him more than an arm, cost him more than a leg, cost him his life, cost him his everything for you. And he says not these words only, but every time those words of hell are mentioned, he says, you do not need to concern yourself with those words, because you're not going there anymore. You are not going there anymore, because Jesus said, I rose, I'm taking you to heaven. I'm taking you to be with me, to a place where your hand, where your foot, where your eye is never going to cause you to sin again, because it's a place where your heart is made perfect. Absolutely perfect. I can't wait to get there. I can't wait to experience what that place is going to be like. I know you can. And until we do, until we get there, let's do more than just heed Jesus' warning about sin. But let's fight against it with a Jesus-like intensity, not taking a casual approach to sin. Let's fight against it not because your salvation is dependent on it, because it's dependent on Jesus. Because Jesus, while he was here, he said, what's more important? Your spiritual life. He would agree that was more important, and he made sure you would have a wonderful life after this. He said, make sure you keep fighting so that you have that life to look forward to. That hiker that we talked about, Aaron Wilson, his story got turned into a book called Between a Rock and a Hard Place, fitting title. It got turned into a movie, I think it was in 2010 with James Franco, called 127 Hours. So you can look those up. But in one or the other, I can't remember if it was both or just the movie or the book, he described this revelation he had. He's trapped there in the canyon, his arm is trapped, and when he realizes he has to cut it off, he has this epiphany. He says, the thing that he thought was so important to him, that arm, he said, was the thing that was trapping him. It was trapping him, he said. And when he cut it off, when he fought through that pain, no longer was there this voice screaming in agony. Rather, he said there was this voice screaming, freedom. Freedom. And he walked away and he lived. God bless you as you do the same, friends. Amen.